Good evening. I'd like to call to order the July 17, 2023 regular school committee meeting at 5:30 PM. At this time, I will entertain a motion to convene an executive session, a non-public session to discuss the approval of the June 14th executive session minutes, collective bargaining pertaining to TTA teachers and superintendent.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mrs. Biagioni-Smith, a second by Mr. Russo. How do you vote, Mr. Parsons?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
Ms. Biagioni-Smith?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well, and that carries 4-0. Right now, we're missing Mrs. Anderson, who we understand will hopefully be meeting us in executive session. So we will reconvene at 6 PM. Great. We reconvene tonight's school committee meeting at 6:04 PM. And if we could please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and our announcement, the July 19th, 2023 regular school committee meeting will be televised and recorded and may be viewed live on Comcast Channel 22 and Verizon Channel 34 or on youtube.com/Tewksbury TV. Under the open meeting law, the public is permitted to make an audio or video recording of an open session at a public meeting. At this time, I ask, is anybody recording tonight's meeting? Okay, seeing no one, we move on. We have, if everybody could join me in a moment of silence. We have 3 beloved members of our school community that recently passed away. We have Maureen Kelly, passed away on July 3rd this year. She's retired from the Tewksbury Public Schools. She was a teacher and librarian, both at the Wynn and Ryan schools, and she also had a pretty significant tenure at the Tewksbury Public Library. Pamela Lucier passed away on July 5th. She retired from the Tewksbury Public Schools from 1984 to 2017. She was a teacher's aide, 33 years here at the Heathbrook, the Dewing, and the former Center School. Jan LaRoque, July 11th, passed away. She was the Assistant Superintendent's Administrative Assistant for 15 years. She worked for the Assistant Superintendents Joe Walsh, Lori Bradley, Patty Lally, and Brenda Reagan. So if you could all join me in a moment of silence and recognition, please. Thank you very much. And then moving on to something a little more enjoyable. Mrs. Reagan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so proud to have with us tonight our Tewksbury Memorial High School girls softball team. Accompanying them is their coach, Ms. Brittany Souza, and athletic director, Mr. Ronald Druin. If I could have coach and athletic director up to the podium, and our team, if you could line up right in front of that podium and come around this way so that the camera will catch you for your recognition. Great.
Thank you for having us. This team was a ton of fun to follow. You know, big expectations off of last year, what they did, and you know, falling in the state final last year, and then to get all the way back there again this year was a great accomplishment. As good a team as they are, they're tremendous young ladies, great representatives of the school, great representatives of the community. Most of them multiple sport kids here and multiple activity student athletes here at the high school. Just a fantastic group. They their tournament run started where they defeated Stoughton 9-1. They then defeated Dartmouth 8-3. Then they defeated Bedford 13-0. Then they defeated Somerset Berkeley in the state semifinal 3-2. They allowed 6 runs throughout the first 4 rounds, getting to the state final. I think if you asked Coach Souza, you know, they would have thought with us having Sam Ryan and Burlington having their pitcher who's a Division I commit, that game was going to be, you know, 2-1, 3-2. I didn't. You know, I'm not sure that Coach probably thought it was going to be a 10-9 game, but it was a fantastic effort. We were, you know, chasing a couple runs early in the game, tied it up. Burlington put up a big number in the top of the 6th, and you know, we come up in the bottom of the 7th. Hung up 5 runs to tie it. Had a chance to win it in the bottom of the 7th. We had a line drive right at somebody. Burlington scored a run in the 8th, and then, you know, we couldn't answer in the bottom of the 8th. But great run by these kids. They're a tremendous group. Coach Souza and her staff has done a great job with these girls, and very, very proud to be their athletic director. They are wonderful role models, and most of this team is back next year, so, you know, hopefully we're here. at this time next year for the right reasons. We're here for the right reasons now, but hopefully we're here, to celebrate a bigger title. So turn over to Coach Souza real quick and get some stuff. I know these young ladies' time is tight, and I don't want to be short with anybody, but they do have a couple things they want to get done. So, Coach, you've got a couple things you want to say before we get the proclamation read?
Perfect. I'm extremely honored to be standing here representing this group of young women tonight. I'd just like to say thank you to Mr. Druin for giving us all the support that he has over the past couple of years. Especially traveling on his birthday the last 2 years. I wish the outcome was a little bit better. And I want to say thank you to the school committee for recognizing these amazing student athletes the past 2 years being here. They deserve so much recognition for their outstanding accomplishments. Although the last 2 years didn't end in our favor, it's truly remarkable that we were able to get to the state championship game twice. This is our third consecutive season that this team won the MVC Division II. The last 2 years, they finished with an identical record of 15-5, and then an overall record of 19-6, which again put us back-to-back state championship games. Like Mr. Druin said, in the final game we played this year, they never gave up. It was quite possibly the best softball game I've ever witnessed. I'm pretty sure they broke state championship records with the most runs scored combined in a game, 10-9. Burlington, we heavily scouted, and we again thought it was going to be bunting in a 1 or 2 run game scored combined, and to see it be 10-9 for a final was incredible. Again, we fell behind 3 times throughout that game and tied the game 3 times throughout that game. It was just truly amazing to watch. In the last inning, again, we were losing 9-4, and we said to the girls, let's just do this one base at a time, and that's just what they did. We had a triple, multiple doubles, a home run, a few walks, and a chance to win the game with the tying run on second base. It was just incredible. It was an amazing moment to be in, whether you were cheering for the Redmen or not. So thank you again tonight for celebrating this extraordinary softball season. This team surely left an incredible mark on our hearts. It's a true testament of their spirit, dedication, teamwork, and displayed throughout this season. So thank you.
Thank you. And the school committee has a recognition.
All right, so the resolution of recognition, whereas the Tewksbury Memorial High School girls varsity softball team demonstrated hard work, sportsmanship, perseverance, and character throughout the 2022-2023 season. Members: Alyssa Adams, Juliana Capiello, Sophia Capiello, Erin Costello, Anya Cranston, Aislinn Davis, Gabriella Davis, Avery Della Piana, Abigail Downing, Whitney Gigante, Becca Harris, Vanessa Iandoli, Jamie Martin, Samantha Perkins, Samantha Ryan, Abby Tower, Mackenzie Tower, Sydney Whalen, team captains Sam Perkins and Sam Ryan, head coach Brittany Souza, assistant coaches Tanya Palumbo, George Covino, and Tama Parsons, athletic trainer Chris Mahana, and athletic director Ron Druin. Whereas the girls varsity softball team are the Merrimack Valley Conference 2 champions. Samantha Ryan is the MVC2 Player of the Year, as well as the Boston Globe and Boston Herald All-Scholastic, and head coach Brittany Souza is the Coach of the Year. And whereas the team defeated Stoughton, Dartmouth, Bedford, and Somerset Berkeley on the way to the finals before falling to Burlington 10-9. Whereas the TMHS girls varsity softball team brought great pride, recognition, enthusiasm, and honor to themselves, to their parents and families, to the Tewksbury Memorial High School, and to the town of Tewksbury. Congratulations, girls.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, girls. We look forward to next year.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate your time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye, guys. Okay, and tonight, we do not have our student council representative with us. She's not here. And then moving on, we have Mr. Dave Libby with a presentation.
Madam Chair, as Dave sets up, I just want to inform you that he has a presentation as promised on some recommended changes that we are researching for our transportation routes next school year. Ideally, we'll be seeking your blessing or approval on these minor changes at the August school committee meeting.
Thank you.
There we go. All set? Go
All
ahead.
set? All right.
Mr. Libby.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Superintendent. We've been looking into what we could do on our end to fix the transportation issues we faced last year, and came up with some recommendations that we can control, a few things that aren't under our control, but I'll address what we know about those issues towards the end of this presentation. Just starting off a little bus transportation 101, kind of the basics of what we look at when we're setting up transportation, the factors we're looking into, number of students. We try to keep 50 per bus is ideal. Under that, close to that, a little bit over is okay. Time is always a factor, of course. Generally, the routes are 20 to 45 minutes in actual route time, 5 to 15 minutes sort of between routes when they're finishing one route, getting to the next place they need to be. So we need to factor that in. Geography, how much area we need to be, we're covering, divided by the number of routes. And AM versus PM, a lot of times what works in the morning, not fine, might not work so well in the afternoon when we're taking kids home. So there's a lot of factors, and it all kind of needs to tie together in the system. So we've historically run a 3-tiered system with 24 buses, with the high school and the Wynn running at the earliest, Tier 1, 10 at the high school, 14 at the Wynn. Tier 2 is just the Ryan School, where we have 16 buses assigned. And then Tier 3 would be the K-4 schools with all 24 buses assigned. And I'm highlighting that 13 buses at the Dewing and what was the Dewing North Street, and then 11 at the Heathbrook Trahan, which after we closed those schools became Dewing Center, Heathbrook Center. But highlighting those numbers for you, I'll get to why, as to why in a minute, but to kind of keep those numbers in mind as we moved along here, and we found a couple of issues that needed to be addressed. So time-wise, this is what it sort of looked like. Tier 1, 7:30 and 7:40 starts, dismissals at 1:50 and 2 o'clock. Ryan School runs 8:15 to 2:35, so that leaves 35 to 45 minutes between tiers. So they have, basically at the end of the day is sort of what drives the transportation generally. We have more kind of leeway in the mornings. We have a bigger window to drop students off and start the routes earlier if we need to, whereas at the end of the day, dismissal time is dismissal time. So we really want to have the buses there waiting for students when the bell rings. So this 35 to 45 minutes between the end of school at one tier and the start of school, the next tier, sort of is what we keep in mind. That gives us the time to get those kids home, get back to our next school. And then between tiers 2 and 3, from 2:35 to 3:05, we have 30 minutes. For those buses that don't have a Ryan School run, some of the buses go right from the high school and the Wynn to their Tier 3 route. They have plenty of time. They have 75 minutes, so they're we assign those buses generally the longer high school and WIN routes and the longer elementary routes so that they can, we know they're going to be there waiting for the students. They're going to be on time, getting loaded, and be able to get on the road as quickly as possible. So this is we've came across to propose for a time change for 23-24 is moving the WIN school 5 minutes earlier and moving the Ryan school 10 minutes earlier. That's going to give us an extra 10 minutes between that second and third tier buses to allow us to get to those K-4 schools in a more timely fashion. So that's sort of what we're looking to do, and this presentation I'm hoping will kind of give you more detail as to how we landed on this recommendation. So after the center school opened, we kept the K-4 transportation model intact, basically just changing those, the North Street and Trahan school to the center school. The issues that came about as a result of that were, one was we now had all 24 buses descending on the center school at arrival and dismissal. The bus loop that was built for that school wasn't designed to handle that many buses. So that was problem number one. And student management is very difficult. We have over 700 students in the school on 3 different floors, organizing them into 24 bus lines to escort them out to their buses. Because of their age, we like to have them supervised when they're coming out to their buses. That presented quite an issue where we were going to keep those kids in the school and where we were going to line them up. Became a problem for the Principal Harding and Principal Rogers to deal with. Also underestimated the increased time between schools. The difference between going from the Dewing to the North Street and now the Dewing to the center turned into quite an extensive difference. Trying to get through the center of town at 3:15 is a lot more time than we anticipated, a lot more time than Google Maps says it was going to be. So that was a factor that we weren't predicting. And then the driver shortage, which is that kind of X factor that we don't have much control over, but I can give you an update on that at the end of this presentation. So the first new model we considered was to have all separate and dedicated buses for all schools at this level. So first thing we look at is enrollment. Based on the enrollment at the 3 schools involved at that time, it would lead us to have 16 buses dedicated to the center school, 5 buses dedicated to the Dewing, and 3 buses dedicated to the Heathbrook. Those numbers that we looked at earlier, the 14 and 11. So now that same geography, that's the Dewing School District, that was covered with 14 buses would now have to be covered with 5 buses. So those routes get real long and need to go down a lot of streets individually. Heathbrook, that was covered with 11 buses in the past, would now have to be covered with just 3 buses. So the pros of this plan, we reduce the amount of buses at the center, and we eliminate the mixing of students between schools. That's sometimes a problem with the ages, and discipline issues get dealt with if they're on separate buses by just one principal instead of having to deal with 2. So that's a nice feature. The cons, though, the routes became very long in some of the more spread out areas of town, and especially with the K-1 schools, that factor that I just mentioned. So we were worried about buses making it to school on time. There's limited time how early they can start those routes, and what time would our younger students be getting home from a 3:05 dismissal. I think we'd be pushing darkness in a lot of cases. So we kind of looked at the map, looked where the students were located, and came to the conclusion that in some areas of the town, combining the routes still made sense. So we're looking at developing a hybrid model for buses in that grade level, where we would have some dedicated school routes and some routes that would be shared between the schools like they are currently. Right now, these would be the numbers that we're looking at. These changed today, but it's a very fluid process. As we fix one problem, we create other problems, and so this is as we sit today. I think the numbers in your package were different last week, so Dr. Osborne's working on this, on these routes. And this was the numbers that she has currently in our transportation software. So the pros to this plan, it still reduces the amount of buses at the center school, not as much as would if they had separate buses, reduces the mixing of students, not eliminate, but does reduce somewhat. But we think this is the best use of our available resources to get students where they need to be as efficiently as possible. So the cons, we still have some long routes in some of the less densely populated areas where students are more spread out, houses are more spread out. But they're shorter than they would be if we only had 5 buses covering some of that whole geography. So still concerned about time in the morning, making it to school on time, and buses that have the Ryan school dismissal, would they have enough time if it was only a half hour to get Ryan kids home and then get back to an elementary school? So that kind of led us to the time issue. So we also discovered last year during the driver shortage that we were able to eliminate 2 Ryan routes fairly easily. Not a lot of students on them, and they were easily kind of absorbed into routes that were in the area. So we're looking at making that a permanent change that we were able to see worked well last year. Doing that allows 2 more buses to be able to go right from their high school or WIN route directly to an elementary. So we know that 2 more buses will, be in the driveway waiting for students when that bell rings at 3:05. So we were proposing a 10-minute earlier time adjustment for Ryan to allow those routes ample time to get Ryan kids home and get to their next school. But we do have a little bit of a time crunch between the WIN and the Ryan. So we thought a 5-minute adjustment there, moving the WIN school 5 minutes earlier would help with getting the buses from the WIN to the Ryan. So some other considerations that are just sort of a factor in any of these models we look at. Longer drive times will be offset by 1 pickup location. Again, that drive time between schools was pretty extensive in a lot of cases, longer than we originally anticipated. We're going to have separate buses serving the same areas at approximately the same times. Some families are going to be not so happy about that. Some families are going to be great with that. It depends on, I think, your perspective, but it's a change, so just want to make people aware of it. And more streets may require crossing due to the length of the routes. We're always able to, in the past, we were, able to kind of cover both sides of a lot of main streets in town, so students were door side. We may not have that luxury in some of the lesser, not like Route 38 or Route 133 or anything like that, but some of the sort of mid-major streets, I guess you'd call them. But the Tewksbury Transit policy requires parents to be at those bus stops for students, so that's a factor we considered when we're thinking about how we route these students. That wasn't always the case in the past. The MyView app is available to assist with arrival time, so we're hoping we have a better way for parents to connect with buses. We had the new company that's running Tewksbury Transit installed stop arms on all buses, which keep students away from the front of the bus, which is sort of a danger zone of the bus. And they sort of extend out from the front of the bus every time the door opens. And those are equipped, all of our buses are equipped with those now. And we plan to emphasize this crossing procedures and safety with our drivers, and ask the bus company to emphasize that when they do their driver training at the bus company. So this is what our sort of bus matrix will look like for 22-23 versus what it looked like in in 23-24 versus 22-23. The Wynn would be no change, the Ryan would be 2 fewer routes, and the K to 4 only shared routes when the geography dictates that it makes sense. So issue number 2, the driver shortage. Working with the bus company, we kind of let them know that we can have the greatest plan in the world, but if we don't have drivers behind the wheel, it's not going to be a big improvement. So ask them how they're doing with their recruiting efforts. And here's the latest that we heard from them. They had 1 candidate pass a road test yesterday, 2 candidates in training with them. So the procedure goes, you get a permit to drive the bus, you do your training, and then you take the road test with the registry. So 2 are kind of on step 2 in the process, in the training with the company. 7 candidates are studying for that permit test. 8 candidates have been contacted and not received a response. They have 19 candidates that are scheduled for information sessions, which would be sort of, just the starting point of, are you interested in becoming a bus driver? 2 brand new candidates contacted the bus company in the last 24 hours, and they have 3 on hold for various reasons. So it looks somewhat hopeful that at least they have a few candidates that are in process and should be hopefully on board by the fall. And I think that is the end of the information I have for you at this point. As Superintendent Regan said, the policy on changing school hours indicates that the superintendent has the authority to make minor changes. I don't know if we consider this a minor change or a major change. So we're bringing it to your attention. At this point, we wanted to make it, just sort of put it out there so people can start wrapping their head around that this could be a definite thing. And once we get better routes established and we are sure that they're going to work, we'll bring an update to the committee in the August meeting.
Okay, thank you so much. If you're welcome to join us back at the table if you want for any discussion or
Okay.
conversation. Any questions, comments from anybody? Mr. Russo?
Yes. appreciate you bringing this to the committee's attention. So I know it's less of our control from the district standpoint. So maybe I'll just comment on this, but most of my questions focus on what it is in our control. As far as the busing company goes today, I mean, the ideal number is obviously 24 drivers, there's 24 buses. What they back up of, I don't know, 5, 6, 8,
Yeah.
whatever they require, whatever they expect. So I appreciate the information, and I'm assuming it's from TTI, it's giving us, hey, this is where we stand with some candidates. But where do they actually stand today with, let's just say 35 drivers potentially? Like, are we better than we were last year? Are we worse? Do we have any indication at this point?
So we finished the year at, with 22 dedicated drivers and 1 spare,
Reserve, right?
and who was also a part-time office worker.
Yeah.
So, the 3 that they have in the pipeline just gives us,
Really put them just over having enough,
yeah,
with no backup really right now. Okay.
right.
Okay. And then, I mean, Dave, one of the concerns that you raised was just on the length of some of the bus routes. And I don't know necessarily what the solution here is, but when you have, between the WIN and, I'm just going to assume for a second, freshmen and sophomores at the high school level, right? Because most juniors and seniors are driving themselves. Out of 850 kids, approximately between 7th through 10th grade, that's about 35 kids on average in 24 buses, roughly, right? But we have the same 24 buses for 1,300 kids, or 55 kids in a bus on average, right? Again, lots smaller bodies, obviously, you can fit, a little bit more kids in a seat if we need to, et cetera. I mean, has there been any talk about like shifting so that you don't need maybe 24 in the beginning, but you need a little bit more just to kind of shrink those bus routes for the younger kids?
Well, the way our contract works, the way in general transportation works is you own the bus for the day. So whether it does 3 routes, 2 routes, 1 route, we're paying the same money.
Yeah.
That's sort of the business model, I think, that the companies use. They get a contract, then they go to their bank, finance their bus purchase. And
Okay, so that's fair. I mean, and I know in the beginning, especially when the center school opened up, there was a lot of drop-offs. There's been a lot of,
yep.
do we find that drop-offs are more likely in the morning, more in the afternoon, consistent, both? And then is there a way to incentivize? I mean, we're paying $8.5 million over 3 years for busing. And again, less likely at the younger age schools, but you get 35 kids on a bus, and usually that's even sometimes half of that because kids are staying after school, especially in the, so it's not even so much about pickup, it's about just after school activities at that point. So again, I'm just trying to figure out, again, we're a district that is fortunate that we don't charge for busing, right?
Right.
And I wish more of our families would take advantage of that, nice service that is included in all of our property taxes that we pay. But at the end of the day, it does impact some of this too, and just in terms of the way that the routes go and stuff.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, Mr. Russo, and that is we do not charge for buses, and we do have a seat for every single student, and that does make it a little tedious because we're not sure if every single student will ride, so it takes a couple weeks to really understand the ebb and flow of bus ridership. We're contemplating a registration. We don't know how accurate it will be, even though it's free, so that we know, and we can tighten up those routes earlier if we know who's definitely taking it, the bus. And there's been an awful lot of research on how we might just get some heads-up information sooner than later. Now, that wouldn't prohibit someone then from saying after, well, I can't drive anymore, I want them to be on the bus, but it may affect a route. So Mr. Libby and Ms. Osborne do a good job at making sure every kid has a seat, but then we will adjust as soon as we know the real numbers.
Right.
A couple weeks into the school year.
And we overbook a little bit at the beginning of the year, knowing that there's a lot of drop-offs, a lot of kids participate in Alphabest before and after school, so we know we're not going to get 100% of the students we assign to a bus are going to actually ride the bus. So, and it used to be a little less scientific. The drivers would report back to us, hey, I don't have anybody at the such and such stop. We delete those stops off routes and kind of handle it that way. With the software that the elementary schools are using now, Pickup Patrol, we find that's pretty accurate, at least to let us know who's using the bus in the afternoons. The schools rely on that pretty heavily, the homeroom teachers, to get the students where they need to be at the end of the day. So over time, we've pulled reports from that software to kind of see. We used that a lot at the end when we had driver shortages and we were trying to combine routes to figure out, our student database said we had 75 kids on 2 buses, but the Pickup Patrol, when we put them together, said it's really only 35. So we were able to combine a route. So that's another tool that we can use, after we get a couple of weeks into the school year.
And I think that's common, that's normal, that's not, that happens every year.
Yep.
And then just my final question is, just from the contract with the teachers unit, but also all the other, obviously, bargaining groups, obviously it allows for them to be made aware. Obviously, we're not lengthening the school day here, we're just simply shifting start and end times, but does that communication happen with all the units?
Yes, and this was a topic of conversation and update twice at our joint labor management meetings.
Yeah.
So, and Dave even put out a message earlier this week reminding them that we had discussed this. We were proposing, the research done so far at tonight's meeting and taking, making a final decision mid-August at that meeting. And it's typically mid-August when bus routes are published. So the start and stop of school times would be published at the same time. Obviously, communication to families is key here, and we can get something like that. And again, it's at the pleasure of the committee. You may want to vote that we move forward with this plan unless otherwise amended. At this point, we can start communicating a little shift. We would not jump the gun on that. We'd wait a little bit. But whether you consider, I think it's important that the committee, in theory, votes to move forward with this, even if you consider this a minor change that by policy could make. I do think families may consider this more than a minor change because of the maybe 2 different family members on a different bus, or 10 minutes can really go a long way for some families. So it really is at the pleasure of the board and what you feel about voting on this, whether tonight or waiting till August.
Any other discussion? Yes.
Just a general question. Instead of going earlier with the times at the Wynn and the Ryan, have you considered pushing back the Doing Heathbrook and Center School to make up that time in between tiers?
Yeah, I did, we did, and then we got into the darkness concern. We're pushing 4 o'clock, 5:04, 10:04 now.
Right.
And then 4 o'clock, it gets pretty dark in early December, right before winter break. So we were concerned about, delivering our youngest students home in the dark.
Yeah. No explanation needed there. Thank you.
Okay.
I just have
Mr. Russo, yeah?
Sorry, Ms. Garabedian. Is there, I know you have this hybrid where some buses will go just to Center, some buses will go to both, et cetera. I'm just trying to think it through. Is there ever a situation where a bus for one family that has 2 elementary school students, that 2 K through 4 students or multiple K through 4 students will be on 2 different buses?
Yes,
That will be the case, right?
right. Which is why I say this might be a minor change, 10 and 5 minutes.
Right.
Consolidating the buses better, but that may feel Now, as Mr. Libby said, some families are more than happy not to have their kindergartner on a bus with a fourth grader.
Right.
And then others, their
Where their
children want to be together.
sibling is,
So,
hey,
yeah,
my
yeah,
kindergarten was going to be with his third grade brother or sister, and now they might not.
yeah.
Sorry, that was all.
Yeah, Mrs. Anderson?
I think I'm good. I had a lot of the same questions, so I think I'm good for now. Sorry, the 22 drivers that we currently have we confirmed that all 22 are coming back? And those folks that you listed are just in supplement to?
They haven't informed me of any reduction from the 22, so
Okay,
I assume
okay,
that they're all still in the mix.
okay. Can we ask that just to make
Yeah,
sure?
I
Because
will.
I think that if we're down less than 22, and we really got to get those ones over the
Yep.
goal line. Okay, that was it.
Ms. Biagioni-Smith?
Yeah, I have a few. So kind of piggybacking off of, I think what Rich started to say originally about the high school routes and the number of high school routes, was it a consideration at all to have fewer high school routes, longer times for them versus longer times for our little kids? I don't know. I've been thinking like older kids have their phones, they have a thing, they can occupy themselves. Little kids tend to get antsy when they're on a bus for a long time.
Yeah, the problem is we need to get those routes to the next tier. So if those routes, and we have those 24 buses for the, as I said, for the day. So making those routes any longer, I don't know what we would gain.
If they're longer, fewer buses frees up more buses to start the trickle down to the other schools.
And that's the key with those, that amount of buses with the longer, younger student routes. They can get started earlier just with this consolidation. So if potentially maybe more of them, we'll be able to once we know the ridership, if you don't need
Yeah.
all 24.
Yeah. Maybe that is an incentive to, in itself, I guess.
The thing with the townwide schools is it's a lot of geography to cover. The high school routes, we, expect that the students will be able to walk longer from their homes to a bus stop or get dropped off further away from their home at the end of the day. So we don't have to get as, close to their homes as we need to, but we still need to cover the whole district.
Okay. And then the last part is kind of a two-part, and it's in terms of communication with how whatever is decided. And the second part of it is the crossing and the policy with the Tewksbury Transit, and just ensuring that communication becomes very clear, especially if, like, my committee member said, that we have some families who are sharing, or whose siblings or neighbors, or, you may have a little kindergartner who would feel comfortable being on a bus with their neighbors, make them feel a little safer in one neighborhood, and now you're going to have that different in a separate neighborhood. So making sure that the communication is very clear so that when there are changes, when there are announcements, that everybody is getting the same thing. And it's not just the kids sharing a bus. If there's a delay, you just see a lot of problems with that. And then in terms of the crossing and ensuring parents are aware of, which I don't think always happens, that especially if there's going to be crossing implications, that they need to be there, because we do see that often in the community, that some routes, maybe a bus driver would be a little bit more lenient with that than another.
Yep.
But if this is going to impact crossing pretty busy streets, I would just want to make sure that, again, communication
Oh,
is
yeah.
super clear.
Yeah, there's a lot of different systems out there, especially at the house stops. I've been on I've monitored a couple buses where, if the shade's halfway down, that means I'm home, and they have all kinds of,
Yeah, if the policy is that a person has to be there, then that's the,
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any specific questions. I think you guys were pretty thorough. Thank you. And thank you to your attention on this, Mr. Libby. I think, I think this is complicated, and if nothing else I've gotten from this, that it's complicated, so.
Can I ask just one
Yeah.
last question? Sorry. As far as safety, are there any additional technology things that can go on those buses for those buses that are having those kids cross those busy streets besides the bar?
I've seen some of the stop signs equipped with video cameras, which I think can be shared with police for, traffic enforcement.
Yeah.
Even if there isn't, an incident, they can, catch a license plate and talk to the person about passing the bus when it's engaged and pick up or drop off. We really feel more comfortable having students cross in the afternoon where the driver's kind of in control of that door and they can see if a car's, doesn't look like they're going to stop, they can not open the door and kind of keep the students on board. Whereas in the morning, they don't have control of the students until they're on board. We've designed routes in the past where we don't cross students in the morning and we allow them to cross in the afternoon because of that difference, where
Yeah.
the drivers know, I see a car coming, it's still coming at 40 miles an hour and it doesn't look like it's stopping, they keep the door shut. So the morning is more of a concern for sort of the transportation world, where
Yeah, just maybe ask the transportation company if there's just anything else that we could add. that would
Yeah.
Just make those specific buses a little bit more safe.
yeah.
And then also, thank you for appreciating that I think some families will find this to be very disruptive to their daily cycle, especially with the siblings, as we've discussed. So at this point, I guess I'll open it to the committee, if there's any pleasure to table this, bring this back in August, or is this something people feel they would want to vote for the approval for the superintendent and Mr. Libby to move forward if necessary?
I guess from my standpoint, just to answer that, Madam Chair, you've mentioned it, we've mentioned the teacher, other bargainings, have we given them an opportunity to come back and question, respond, or are we just telling them and that's it?
Did that email go to all of the units at that time?
No, just the
TTA?
Just the TTA.
We'll certainly make sure that all units are aware. There really, I think, is only one other. The nurses follow the teacher day.
Yep.
The aides follow the student day, so that would, but they're part of the TTA. But the secretary's day may be adjusted, so we'll make sure that it's shared with them as well. It won't change the custodian day.
Right. So my feeling on it would be to just table till next month, just to give that an opportunity to flush out, but
Okay,
I'll defer to my colleagues as well.
that's fair. Any thoughts from anybody else?
I agree with that. I think a little bit more work and a little bit more solid plan, and then we can vote on it.
Okay. Our next meeting is August
16.
16th. So my only thought on that is I feel I have the confidence in administration to look at this, and whatever these decisions are that are made, I feel confident in what the decisions are. I think as a family member, not knowing for sure or for certain if this is going to happen until the week or so before school would feel late for me. But I defer to the majority of the board.
Madam Chair, I'd be okay, I mean, the superintendent, you brought it to us because you felt that, some may consider it minor, some may consider it major. If the committee feels that this change is minor, I'd be okay with allowing, Ms. Regan and Mr. Libby to adjust accordingly based on their final results and anything that comes out of other units, maybe.
I'm okay supporting this as a starting point, and I trust everyone to, you'll adjust month to month. It's always fluid,
I don't
as
see any
Mr. Libby said.
huge changes from this.
Yeah, I don't want to hold you up for a month, you know.
Yeah.
Help in communicating sooner than later.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion, actually, to move forward with this with a caveat that, Mr. Libby, Ms. Regan, that you come back in August and finalize it in front of the committee so that we can present it to the community at that time as official, but I agree that they should be able to move forward. So I would like to make a motion to allow Ms. Regan and Mr. Libby to
Is there a second?
forward.
Just to clarify, they're moving forward to adjust as presented
As
tonight, or they're
presented.
moving forward to continue their search and
Just as presented.
adjust as presented? Okay.
And I agree with that.
I'll second that.
Okay. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
Any opposed? Okay. So then, to clarify, that would give you, our consent approval to move forward in those 5-10-minute increments as we presented tonight. We'd love some feedback.
And we'll be thoughtful in our communications and seek feedback, too, from families if they think of things we haven't.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is our citizens forum. Is there anybody here to speak tonight? All right, seeing no one, we can move on to the approval of minutes with Mrs. Anderson.
Approval of minutes for June 14th, 2023, regular meeting minutes.
Is there a motion?
Making that motion?
Oh, I'm making a motion to approve the June 14th, 2023, regular meeting minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, so a motion by Mrs. Anderson and a second by Mr. Russo, and all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that motion passes unanimously. Okay, and the submission payment of bills, Mrs. Anderson.
I am making a motion to approve the payroll period ending June 22nd, 2023, in the amount of $1,491,993.76.
Okay, a motion by Mrs. Anderson, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Russo, to approve and certify the payroll period ending June 22nd, 2023, in the total amount of $1,491,993.76. Mr. Parsons?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. B. Joni Smith?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well for a unanimous vote.
I am making a motion to approve the payroll period ending July 6, 2023, in the amount of $1,376,150.77.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion by Mrs. Anderson, a second by Mr. Russo, to approve and certify the payroll period ending July 6, 2023, in the total amount of $1,376,150.77. Mr. Parsons?
Aye.
And Mr. Russo?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mrs. B. Joni Smith?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well for unanimous vote. And Mrs. Terry Regan for your superintendent report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first of my updates, most of these updates are in your consent agenda, but I want to thank Ms. Karen Baker O'Brien for, again, mentoring a new school adjustment counselor intern, Ms. Taylor Anderson, in the last school year. We plan to have Ms. Anderson coming back to the Center Elementary School for our next school year. So Karen's work with many school adjustment counselors, many, and guidance counselors, has really been a reward to the district in being able to hire some stellar support services in our town. So I thank her, and when you get to approving the consent agenda, this gift that has been made to Karen in a free course for her work with budding educators will be hers. And again, thank you to Ms. Karen Baker O'Brien. She has put together a lovely summary. These aren't reports that come right out of our AP testing reports, but she put this together for your benefit to show our steady increase in summary of student AP tests. So what we're seeing, if you look at the front page there, is a nice steady increase on students participating. And think about it, we have less students at the high school, but a nice increase of students participating in these high-rigor courses. If you look at our test performance on scoring a 3 or higher, since COVID, we're seeing a nice increase as well. And then the second page I asked her to put together is, well, what are we seeing for the percentages of exams that our students take in each of the courses? So I really want to, give a shout out and thank our teachers and our students for participating in these very difficult high rigor courses, and especially a shout out to those teachers. If you look at some of them, 80% or more, some 100% students taking those exams are scoring 3 or higher. So good work, students, good work, teachers. Again, thank you to Karen for sharing this report, or the summary of the report with you. The next in my updates is to thank many people who have volunteered to be on our Wellness Advisory Committee. That's Ron Druin, Deb Mugford, Kelly Constantino, Melissa Braga, Paige Imping, Kim Toro, Shannon Gillis, Ashley Pavlakis, Maria Ruggiero, Danielle Newell, Victoria Cordero, Caleb Iajoni-Smith, Rich Russo, Christy Sarcioni, and Julie Fabiano. I have approved this list of members, and we have shared with them the date and time of our first meeting, or of your first meeting.
Great.
I'm happy to officially announce, and you remember when we were here in June, you saw that big yellow column of Accelerated Academy grant dollars. We were unsure. We were pretty confident that we would be receiving the grant dollars, but we got the official letter right after we shared the agenda with you that we will be awarded from the state $94,000 so that we can run an additional week on all of our summer extra help and tutoring, almost all of our programming. And this will serve hundreds of students. We have 13 different academies that will run with about 24 Tewksbury educators giving our students the extra help they need. The next item in your consent agenda that I want to draw your attention to, and you hear us talk about the TFM, the required tiered focus monitoring review of our district, you'll see that the TPS review has us in Tier 1. And what you're going, I'm not going to read through this whole report. You've had it. It's also been posted to our website for the public to view. But I'm going to draw your attention to is our celebrations and our areas of some needed focus. And what happens is from the Tier 1, which is where we're at, a self-directed district, there becomes a development of a continuous improvement monitoring plan. It's called the SIMP. And that plan is, this review, this tiered focus monitoring review happens every 3 years. And the criteria are our special ed programming, our civil rights programming, and our English language education, meaning our ESL programming. And this report particularly focused on special ed and civil rights criteria. So I want to draw your attention to pages 8 and 9 in the review. And you'll see that there are several ways that you are reviewed in our tier, and that is whether the criteria has been implemented, partially implemented, not implemented, and not applicable. We are very, very proud to say that all 11 special ed criteria have been implemented, and 17 of the 18 civil rights criteria have been implemented, with one of the criteria, which I'm going to focus on a little bit for you, criteria 3, is partially implemented. Now, it's a civil rights standard. However, if you read page 9, and I'm sure you looked at that, I'm just going to read for you the description of this standard. The analysis of our data and staff interviews indicated that all students do not have equal access to the full range of general education programs. Specifically, IEP teams do not consistently consider the least restrictive environment for students with disabilities. Data demonstrated the following, and this data is very important. Approximately 48.6% of our eligible special ed students are served in full inclusion, a rate that's lower than the state at 67.2%. And then approximately 29.4% of our eligible special ed students are in partial inclusion, a rate that's higher than the state at 13%. So basically, too many of our students are getting services outside of the general ed setting. And we, I would say, for all good intent, are over-servicing outside of that general ed setting, and we need to correct that. So you'll see that some of our action plan items that will occur very soon, this fall, at the start of the school year, is we've already established a district-wide inclusion team. who will look at increased participation for eligible students in full inclusion. We'll submit results with a root cause analysis as to why so many of our students are, and I'm going to use my term, being over-serviced, if you will. And then we will develop a further plan to address the full inclusion need for students. So you can see the action plan will increase the rate of full inclusion. You'll hear more about this in August at our retreat. I really, want to thank Rick Pelletier and Karen Baker O'Brien. They lead those two criteria categories, special education and civil rights. This is a 3-year process, as I said, and it is a huge process collecting and submitting the data to the Department of Education on a regular basis. And with that, our thank you to all of our administrators who really helped Karen and Rick pull the data together and lead the administrative tasks. So you'll hear more about this. I'll continue to share our progress, but this is really, really amazing that out of all the data we submitted, we have one partially implemented. It's a big one that we really want to correct on behalf of our students, but it is one of all those criteria. So that's something we can really be proud of as a district. Okay, and then I have, for the school committee's review, submitted to you some personnel hires for this start of the school year, as well as the principal's recommendations for a myriad of Appendix B positions in intramural clubs. And then I'd like to thank, on behalf of the committee, we'll be sending a letter, I hope, to Jack Stabman, who gave us a little visit at the district office last week and donated 500 TMHS lanyards for students' IDs. He said he really didn't know what he would do with 500 and thought our students could use them, so thank you to Jack. He sends his best to the committee. And then finally, on behalf of Assistant Superintendent McDermott, who could not be here tonight, and myself, I just want to thank the committee for allowing us the opportunity to go to the MASS Superintendent Executive Institute down at the Cape last week. Highlights of the conference were really around leading change and positive school culture, improving literacy, instructional practices, the student perspective on what schools look like and feel like moving forward. And more than anything, it's always a great opportunity to network with other district leaders, and especially for Lori, who's new as a district leader, to be with other leaders who are facing the same issues and having sharing solution-based discussions. So it was a wonderful opportunity, and again, we thank the committee for allowing us that opportunity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any discussion, comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just one. Thank you for the report. I read the tiered focus monitoring results, and I think it's great. I would love to see the results of the root cause analysis. I think we did mention it in one of the last meetings when we talked about it, so I think it said October 30th, so maybe the November meeting, maybe hearing about that would be great, just to hear how it went and what the action plan ends up being. I would love to just hear more on that. Thank you.
Happy to share.
And anyone else?
Yep, sure.
Mr. Russo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent Regan, for the presentation and the information. I had some questions around the AP exam and some of the analysis that Ms. Baker O'Brien put together.
Okay.
So, I'm pleasantly surprised, honestly, to see the number of both, not only the number of students, but also the number of exams, ticking up slowly each year, which is wonderful. And who knows, I know with a lot of the dual enrollment stuff now that has been introduced for the upcoming school year, maybe some AP stuff tails off or plateaus or maybe even drops a little bit. I'm encouraged to see that the percent of scores that have been going up, it's been going up the last 3 years. Obviously, it would be great to get back to that 75-80% range. But again, I understand that takes a little bit of time. I guess what maybe discourages me a little bit, if I'm being honest, and I vaguely remember going back to my own days as a senior in high school, and I remember the teacher at the time saying exactly these words to me and to all my other classmates is, you will be lucky to get past a 2 in an AP exam because we just don't have enough time to cover all the material and content that the AP exam requires. So when I look at some of these scores, and it's not across the board, it varies here. Obviously, there are some, which is great to see, 3.5s and higher on average, and then there are others where it's a little discouraging, so it makes me wonder, are the staff being supported, or do they have enough of resources to be able to get through all that content? Or it's just, maybe there's just not enough time, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we have been committed to running our AP courses for a full year. So that's something a little unique to Tewksbury now, where not all districts run. They run them per semester. And then students are on their own maybe to prep for the exam in May. We run the course all year long. And we've done that even through when we had the 4x4 block.
Yeah.
So that, I think that contributes to our students doing better. And sometimes we need to realign to the curriculum based on a realignment of it. Remember, AP courses are test prep courses. They're very specific to what is presented on the test, and sometimes that shifts. So that would be the question we're going to ask next in some of these courses that maybe didn't have students performing quite as high as we would love to see them. And then the second thing is, or the third thing, we're not requiring the test next year.
Right.
Many students will still take it.
Sure.
So we also know that by requiring it, some students are very interested in the course or really want an AP experience as an early college prep experience, but don't do well on exams. So we don't want to, dissuade them from taking the course that they want just because they don't take the test. Now, I'll also tell you, and after being at the high school for a little bit of time, some students decide they're not going to report the test. So they just sit down and they don't take it to the seriousness of if they were reporting it. So there's lots of factors that go into that.
Okay.
We feel that if we make the test optional, recommended but optional, we're probably going to see students that really feel better about taking the test, maybe those percentages going up a little bit.
Better data, that would give us better data.
It would.
So then, and again, not for tonight, but I don't know if we have information about, because you're kind of comparing some of this to some of the dual enrollment aspect, and again, I think with the influx of, and the new partnership with SNHU, is there any historic data in general on dual enrollment credits that we have that do get accepted into college?
Oh,
Again,
I'm not sure
for
about that,
now,
but I can.
If there's anything
yeah.
available, I think might be helpful just to have some context, because it kind of paints a brushstroke on this,
Yeah.
and then when you start to compare this to dual enrollment, what's our historic track?
That's something we should probably start tracking with our seniors at post-graduation now, too, to see.
Because you don't know until you apply for college if that credit's going to be accepted or not.
And with dual enrollment, it's different. You have a bona fide college transcript.
Right.
With an AP, you have a test score that not all colleges accept for various reasons.
Right.
So it really is, but it's an interesting question that we should think about our postgraduate survey and see if we can get that data after they leave us. But I also wanted to note on the AP tests, some of them are also dual enrollment. So it's a wonderful thing that they could decide, how they want to approach getting the early college credit for that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
And Mr. Parsons?
Yeah, just since we're talking about AP tests, do we have comparable AP classes and dual enrollment? Like, do we have AP biology, and then you could, if that seems too rigorous or too much of a commitment, you could take the dual enrollment option?
Some of them are like that, because remember, AP is, the curriculum is designed for the test, which means it may not be as expansive as a college is looking. So biology is a great example, where they may want the dual enrollment bio with lab. Their experience doesn't necessarily align to the AP test, but aligns to the syllabus that a college expects to see. So sometimes you can take that or that. You think it's AP statistics? It's both. You can take it and take the AP test if you want, or take it for dual enrollment, same course. I think calculus is the same. Some of them are follow the same path and the same syllabus, and others do not, so there's a choice.
Okay, just my only concern with the test optional piece of it, just that there is a possibility that AP class loses a little rigor. That's just my own personal observation and just conversations I've had in the education world.
Yeah.
Just something to consider.
Yeah, and it has been, I should remind you, I don't know if you remember, we inventoried and surveyed the Merrimack Valley. And just keep in mind, if the AP test is required, technically we should be paying for it for every student. if it's a requirement. So when I did survey our surrounding districts, of the 13 that I was able to speak directly to their assistant superintendent, 11 are in the same boat as us. There were only two are optional. Only 2 of us were still holding out on required AP tests. So this is very typical in other districts. So I think we'll learn a lot from our colleagues if we start to see that.
Okay.
But, keep in mind, if it's an AP, let's just go to biology, that teacher still needs to prepare those in the class that are taking the test. So it should not run off course for what's expected.
Okay. And then, sorry, I think you just mentioned it, but I missed it. Does the district pay for AP tests, or do families?
No, students do. And
Okay.
they would pay for their own. Yes,
My thought has changed. I like having the option then.
yes, yes.
Okay.
And it's as expensive as a dual enrollment course. An AP test is in the $90-something range, where the dual enrollment credit through SNU is $100 for all 3 credits. So not $100 each credit, $100 for 3 credits. So now it's comparable.
Yep, I gotcha. Thank you.
As a parent of 3 high school students, I know how much this all costs.
Oh, yeah.
Any other questions, comments on Mrs. Regan's update? No? No. Okay, I have no questions. Thank you so much. And we do miss Mrs. McDermott. Look forward to seeing her next month. And Mr. Libby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple brief updates for the committee. The business office is working diligently closing year 23, which ended June 30th. We pretty much finalized our numbers there, which are reflected in your packet. So we can get to that later. And we've begun the work of opening fiscal year 24, loading budgets into Munis, adjusting our salary tables, updating our service contracts with our vendors, and purchase orders as necessary. We're also starting to receive our exact grant figures from the Department of Ed and Circuit Breaker as well. So we're adjusting. Sometimes those numbers have an impact on our LEA budget as we find some funding opportunities for different things in our budget in those grant areas. So we'll sometimes make adjustments to our budget, and also through the hiring process as we find out, where folks land on our salary scale as we bring them in to replace folks retiring or resigning from Tewksbury, and get those exact figures. Sometimes those present opportunities, sometimes those go the other way. No. But finding qualified staff is difficult, and sometimes requires their starting higher on the salary scale. So I'll likely be bringing forward a budget transfer in September to sort of address all those issues after the dust settles with our staff and the grant figures and the other sort of revolving areas where we can fund some of our expenses throughout the school year. So summer maintenance. As far as summer maintenance projects we have going on, just a brief update. Center school work is continuing. Some punch list items, some items that we're referring to as fit-up items that have been added to the project as we realized we needed them once we got into the school building. Those are continuing to happen over the summer. Some big ones, the gym floor, seen a marked improvement in the appearance of the gym floor with the warmer weather and the increased relative humidity, which was predicted by most of our our vendors, and we did receive the gym floor consultant report. We hired an independent consultant and indicated that the floor will indeed correct itself over time. We do have the vendor scheduled to come in to service the floor tomorrow and Friday. Service means light sand screening and applying another coat of poly. So he's doing that this week. They have been removing some of the filler that was placed up in the floor during installation. And we're hoping that the second coat also helps address some of the shrinkage that we saw during the winter season last year. So we're kind of still on a wait and see how that reacts over time. But we are seeing progress with just kind of a wait and see mode. The third floor bathroom door has been installed, so that's kind of a big one. We were able to create a staff bathroom on the third floor. We're going to see some added signage to the parking areas get installed very shortly. Hopefully help and improve with our traffic flow in the parking lot area. We've begun some preliminary site work on the Dewing preschool playground. That material has been ordered. We're waiting for that to arrive. I believe it's mid-September we're expecting arrival of the actual playground apparatus. So we have done some preliminary tree work on the site there, and we believe the vendor will be coming out to do some groundwork as well for that project. And the Wynn cafeteria roof repair, ceiling repair inside the cafeteria where we had a pipe burst during one of those cold spells. That's sort of an insurance claim. That work's being completed this week as well. So a lot of our big summer projects are progressing very well during the early part of the summer.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any questions?
I'm good.
Will the center school gym be open and available this fall and winter for sports?
I certainly hope so.
And then
That was actually one of the recommendations, is more use would actually benefit the floor.
Okay. And then I know that we had a grant for HVAC systems, and I believe that work was supposed to be done this summer.
The design work is being done this summer. The actual installation will be next summer.
Okay, and is that design work on schedule to be completed?
Yeah, it's progressing. We haven't seen the spec or the bid yet. The plan was to put that out to bid in September
Okay,
from the engineer.
okay. Thank you.
Any questions?
I just want, because Katie took my rollover HVAC question that I ask every month. With regard to the center school use, was there still something prohibiting like the roaming from the building, or was there something else that was aside from just the floor that was preventing us from being able to use the gym? Were we looking? I feel like I remember we were looking for ways to like kind of block the classroom areas and the elevator, keeping in mind where the elevator is and being able to use all that space.
And safety protocols.
Yeah, I briefly was discussing that with Mr. Harding and Rogers this week. We're looking at, there's an entrance in the back of the building with stairs that go up just to the first floor, very close to the gym. Potentially using that as a gym entrance, maybe just for practices during the week. to kind of limit access to the building. I think, during busier times on the weekends when there's games and there's fans and there may be, a need for an elevator, the main entrance would probably be the way to go. We were talking about using the main entrance, closing off the cafeteria, having everyone go up the stairs or the elevator right at the main entrance, and then we can close down the rest of the building. They would go through the second floor, sort of that bridge area, if you will, to get to the gym. So we may need to do some gates or some other solutions to kind of keep the building contained, but yeah, it is on the radar of how we're going to manage that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, great, thank you. My only other question, I know we had talked, there had been some discussion with the high school roof at some point. Is that still kind of in the mix or on hold?
Yeah, I know there was a membrane issue. I got to follow up and see where we're at with that. I haven't heard that we've had a problem, and we've had enough rain where if we're going to have a problem, we'd have a problem.
It's going to happen, yeah.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, well, thank you. I mean,
Sure.
it's a busy time. Thank you for all your work.
Madam Chair, if I can just add just one quick caveat, and that is, it has been really yucky weather, right? Bad hair weather, wet weather, humid weather. I'm humid. I'm kidding a little bit, but really, our custodial maintenance staff deserve to be recognized through all this bad weather, and all of this muck have been just plugging along. There's a lot of work to get done before we open schools again. So I know Mr. Libby mentioned many of the projects going on, but really they're the ones getting that work done. And you hear it tonight, our schools are still constantly being used. So they're trying to juggle all of that while we keep putting people in the building. So if any of them are watching or listening, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I agree. And then, so moving on to the consent agenda, anything, it looks like it was covered pretty thoroughly. Any questions, comments? Is
I
there a
just
motion?
have a question, and it's not, it might just be a clerical thing, but the last piece in the consent agenda, recommending the school committee to vote to reappoint, do we have to do that separately, or can that still be part of the consent agenda?
Can you say that again, please?
For the non-union stipend recommendation for the co-directors of physical and health wellness, it says I'm recommending the school committee vote to reappoint. Can we have that as part of the consent agenda, or does that need to be separate?
So, yeah, so when we also do vote to reappoint all these other positions, like, so
Okay.
we're
It's all part of
reappointing,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
We're reappointing, the intramural directors, these Appendix B, so I think that's a separate letter that is asking us to
I think
vote.
that's a new business.
Oh, is this the one pertaining to Ronald Druin?
Yeah.
Okay. That is aside from Appendix B, it is an annual, Mr. Druin as the AD takes on part-time stipend to coordinate all the PE and health curriculum, K through 12. So while he's not part of Appendix B, and it's not part of the non-union vote we're going to take later, this is my recommendation that he fulfill that role
Okay.
still.
So by us voting on the consent agenda, that would include.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
No, it's great. So any other questions, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented this evening.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so a motion by Mr. Russo, a second by Mr. Parsons to approve the consent agenda as proposed. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that's 5-0, it passes. And then now we move on to policy, right? Oh, no, sorry, school committee member reports. And we start with Mr. Russo with the Elementary School Building Committee.
Mr. Libby took all the updates, so, no, just a couple other small things. As Mr. Libby mentioned, punch list is being worked on. We touched upon the gym floor, which probably was sort of the one that, people knew of the most. But they've also been able to take care of a few other things. I know there's been a lot of phantom beeping that was resolved. The HVAC, system is being worked on. I don't know if there's any final resolution to that since, but I know it's in process. The one that I thought was the most interesting, though, is all the all the desks and chairs, all the chairs in the entire building. Just think about that for a second. All the chairs in that entire building, all of the screws need to be retightened. So anyway, those things are being worked on because clearly we want those all put together correctly before any staff or students start sitting in them. But so all that is being worked on. And again, it's just a matter of, just tying things out to budget, paying some last minute bills. And we'll meet again on August 17th.
Great, thank you. And Tewksbury CPAC, Mr. Parsons and Mrs. Biagioni Smith.
Okay, so the CPAC released their 2023 to 2024 business meeting schedule. Other than that, I'm going to refer to my colleague.
Yep, so I have the dates for that, and I can pass them on for the future meeting
be great.
information. But they are on their Facebook page for anyone who's looking to attend those, and they are set through the end of June 2024. They're going to continue to do their workshops and things they normally do, but their first meeting coming up will be September 21st, 2023.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Policy Subcommittee, that's myself and Mrs. Anderson. Did you have anything you want to add before we move on to policy?
No, I think we've had a couple of good sessions. I think it's been a little bit difficult with people on PTO or taking a little bit of time off with their families, but we've gotten a couple things done over the last month or so.
And we have no scheduled upcoming meetings.
And before we dive into the actual policy changes, can we just the wellness, can we just touch upon that just for a moment?
Oh, I'm sorry, I
brief
skipped
moment?
that, sorry.
No, it's
Wellness,
okay.
Yep, Mr. Russo, Mrs. Biagioni Smith.
Yeah, no, I mean, we haven't met since our last meeting, but as Ms. Regan pointed out tonight, we've added to the committee. All those positions have been appointed. Our next meeting is September 6th, so hopefully we'll have good showing of the committee, and we're really going to work to try to establish a calendar of events, or at least months, and really try to work on, and take some of those things on so that we can start hitting, whether it's Nutrition Month, Mental Health Awareness Month, all these different things that happen throughout the course of the school year. So that'll be the focus when we get back September 6th.
Great, thank you. Okay, Mrs. Anderson?
Okay, so we've got a couple of informational readings, first readings, et cetera. So we'll go through the informational readings first. For this, there is no action. Policies that we reviewed are recommending to revise. No action necessary. Informational reading policies will come back next meeting as the first meeting. So the first one was policy JIC, suspension. We are in the recommendation for changes, we're actually recommending to change this policy name to student discipline.
Is there any discussion on JIC? No? Okay. So,
Actually, I do have a question.
yes, Mr. Parsons.
If it's appropriate, given the time, it could wait till next meeting too. Just from the Massachusetts legal end, just any kind of regulations on what schools can and can't do regarding student discipline. I just think that'd be useful just for understanding and add some context to this policy.
Well, the district and the school can certainly set the code of conduct. However, the way the regulation changed was on suspension, and that for typical infractions in code of conduct, we are to seek all available other options, or whether it's restorative justice or other types of disciplinary actions in lieu of suspension. So there are still felonies and, drug and alcohol, the type of charges that still can fall right to suspension, but this change in the policy addresses the change in the law. 37H and 3/4, but it's one of the fractions. Don't quote me on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and so no action, and we'll move on to our next.
Okay, the next one that was reviewed, again, informational reading only, IJNDD, Facebook and social networking websites.
And any discussion? This was also one that we had recommended a name change as well.
Yeah.
And this was, I think it was district social media policy? Is that how we worded it?
Madam Chair, so just maybe a comment for myself. So So I went through a lot of the changes, make good sense. I think is maybe just sort of conceptually, maybe the one thing that I'm struggling with that I'm not really seeing here covered, because a lot of this stuff seems very intuitive, right? At the end of the day, staff members, employees of the district, whether they're on their contractual time or not, they still are representatives of the district. So how, when someone's doing something on their own personal time, you can make an argument that it's their personal time. However, we all have jobs, right? We're all professionals in some way in various aspects. We also represent, even though we're not working all right now at our jobs right at the moment, we still represent the roles that we have in the jobs, in the day jobs that we have. So, Madam Chair, you're employed, so you wouldn't go on and start talking about things in a social media setting because it could cost you your job, right? Is there something here that governs sort of the way things are portrayed? And I look back sort of, I look back at some, even like things that, maybe even the union will post on their own, Facebook social media page. It was just a recent post that they had about, a legal ruling that was ruled upon, and, just the comments there, the way things were portrayed, it just raises a red flag. It's because it presents this picture of, staff member versus parent, or staff member versus administration, or whatever the parties might be. So is there something that governs the way that things are portrayed? I don't know. The way I read it, it didn't seem.
So, just speaking from the subcommittee perspective, I think both of these, the last policy as well as this one, I think we did our best to align with what the MASC policy had, to run both of them through our legal, to just kind of be sure that we were, in the right direction. But overwhelmingly, I think, felt as though there were large policies, and that we kind of just deferred to the 5-member committee to kind of look at some of this stuff. So certainly, if you see language that you would want to introduce in here somehow,
This is just a first, an informational reading, so this is going to come back a couple more. Okay.
Yeah.
so it'll come back 2 more times. So I think, I think maybe it would be more helpful from our perspective on the subcommittee, is that if you have kind of a concrete directive.
That's fair.
I'd like to see in this paragraph, this language, then maybe that could give us something.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
Just one thing that I just caught
Yes.
quickly. On the first page of that policy, the 3rd paragraph down, the last phrase there, taking care not to blur the lines between personnel expression and expression as district staff. Should personnel really be personal?
I think, I think.
Oh, personal.
I can see that posing a problem.
Yes,
That's fair.
thank you.
Good catch, Nick.
Good catch, Nick. So again, I think, we'll see this again next month, and then the month after. So it's a great place to start, maybe, but maybe might not be where it needs to be.
This is a lot of work and a lot of changes, so I appreciate the efforts there. Great deal.
Yeah. Okay. And Mrs. Anderson?
Okay. The next one is a first reading. No action necessary, informational reading. Policies will come back next meeting for a second and final reading. The CM, School District Annual Town Report.
Okay. All right, so any discussion on this? This is our second look at this one.
Nope. No.
Okay. All right. Moving on.
Yep, so the next one is first and final reading. We've reviewed the policy, we're recommending to adopt with no change. This will require a vote. ECE, TMHS student parking.
So this one, this will require a vote as a one-time review. Any discussion on the parking?
So, yeah, this is something that I feel like this has come up a couple times. So I think, and please, Madam Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is basically deferring to this and then remove sort of the detailed parking privilege language that ultimately defers to the handbook.
Right.
Correct.
The details went into the handbook, that's correct. Yes.
So the topic of parking pass payments has come up. I know it's come up in this meeting a couple times, it's come up outside of this meeting a few times. From my understanding, there was roughly about 400 parking passes that were distributed last year. My assumption is that there'll be something similar for next year. At $150 a pop, that's $60,000 a year, approximately.
No, I think there's roughly 400 parking spaces in total.
Okay.
And
200.
Yeah, about
200
200
passes. Okay.
issued to students.
Okay.
It fills the lot.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so roughly around $30,000 or so. Do we have an understanding of how much historically, and again, I know there's a little bit of a blip in here with COVID, I get it. Do we have a history and an understanding of how much it actually costs us to maintain, provide personnel, whatever funds are coming out, so that we should, at the end of the day, I understand we want a little cushion in this account, but are we really, do we have a cushion in the account, from my understanding? And please, correct me if I'm saying anything misleading here or incorrect. So the intention isn't obviously to bleed it dry, but the intention is to not also be profiting off of it as well. So has that been discussed or looked at a little more closely?
Yeah, so right now we fund 50% of one of our security monitors here at the high school with the parking account, which is roughly 12 to 15,000. Would be about 50% of one of their salaries. We are in the process of seeking landscape bids to renew the contract to deal with the mowing of the grass here and adding the lawn areas at the center and Ryan schools. Our existing contractor was very reasonable for the past several years, and for some reason hasn't been responsive to our request to renew. Maybe his number was a little low. So I'm a touch nervous of what we're going to get back from our requests for proposals from our landscape companies that we've been seeking bids from.
But Mr. Libby, we have landscaping costs at all of our schools, so is that really coming out of our parking?
Well, the parking fee not only helps to fund our security monitors who monitor the parking lot, because
Yeah, of course.
it's
No,
a high
which totally
school
makes sense.
parking lot.
Totally makes sense.
But also maintain the parking lot, and I think that's where Mr. Libby was going.
Okay.
It wouldn't be that we can fund all the maintenance of our lot with the fees, but with the lining of the lot and then the taking care of those strips of islands, that helps to fund that too. It's a big lot. It's far different than our other, we don't need that level of maintenance in our other schools. We need it here to allow for especially student parking who, aren't always the safest of drivers, and it needs regular maintenance annually, if not twice annually, on the lining. And
Listen, I understand, if you lower this, it's got to come out of somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? I get it. I totally understand that. I understand how the math works. Again, I guess where I'm coming from is, if we have a history of this and what we've been spending for the last 5 years, I think that would be helpful and be transparent at the end of the day.
if you remember, Madam Chair, through you to the committee at the last meeting, the one where we approved the high school handbook.
Yep.
We also approved a lowered cost at that, it being explicit about the lowered cost halfway through this
Prorated,
school
right.
year. Correct. And have never, if anything, we've lowered the parking fee at one time, we don't raise it. And we've been consistent with that.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's just a thought. Is there any way that the student parking privilege could be tied into discipline at the high school?
It is. And it can be a loss of privilege, especially if we talk about any of those felony incidents that I talked about for sure, or just irresponsible safety and security out there, or other disciplinary factors. It may be one of those other progressive measures that is used in lieu of. Yes, for sure, it is a privilege, so we say, or, an option, but one that certainly is not a guarantee should the student not use it responsibly.
Okay, so I'm just, with the discipline policy, just concerned about the, I don't know, for lack of a better term, sticks that we have. Parking and being able to drive to school seems like a pretty effective stick at the high school level. I was just curious there,
Yeah.
but it sounds like that's at the discretion of the principal in the building.
From a educator standpoint, I appreciate where you're coming from, and many of our student drivers are our highest offenders of tardies. The bus is on time. Often our student drivers are not.
Yep.
So, yeah. So I appreciate that perspective.
Okay. So if everybody's okay, so just getting back to ECE, which does not include anything in terms of
Fees or anything.
fees or anything like that. This is no change. This is a recommendation for no change. Is there any discussion on this? Would you like to see this come back differently, or does the board feel confident in voting on this tonight?
I'm okay with the way this reads personally.
Okay, so is there a motion to,
Make a motion to adopt ECE as presented.
I'll second that.
all right, so a motion by Mrs. Biagioni Smith and a second by Mr. Russo. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And the motion passes, and ECE has now been recommended to adopt with no change. Okay, Mrs. Anderson?
And the last policy will be ECE-R, which we kind of touched upon during the last discussion. It is the TMHS student parking privileges, and we're recommending to rescind this, as all of this is covered in the TMHS student handbook.
Yep.
And it does mention in here, one of the revocation of parking privileges is excessive lateness to school. So it is in the student handbook for the students to see.
Any discussion?
I'd like to make a motion to rescind ECE-R as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, so a motion by Mrs. Biagioni Smith, a second by Mr. Russo. All in favor, please say aye.
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 And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. Okay, and then next on our agenda is old business, and Mr. Libby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've put in your packet our final quarterly update on expenditures for fiscal '23, sort of where we landed at the end of the year, with an available budget of $348. So we were able to squeeze mostly every penny we could out of this year's budget. What you at the starting with the summary page, I guess. Anything you see in the encumbered section is purchase orders where we're expecting to be invoiced for some sort of service or supply that we ordered before the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. So those are just our outstanding invoices we're expecting from vendors. And at the end, then we have the detailed line item pages broken down by cost center that follows that summary. The kind of new piece that we were requested to do by the town was a budget transfer to sort of as a housekeeping matter, to get our salary area of the budget out of a deficit, and, our operating area out of a deficit, and move some money from our salary area into our operating area, so that overall our both accounts would be in the black. It's something that the town accountant thought we should do, whereas it's voted that way at the town meeting, is the salary, operating, capital outlay, and fixed costs. He recommended that we stay within those areas expense-wise, or do a budget transfer to make it so. So the one that's included in the packet was moving budget money from salaries into operating accounts to make that change. Since the packet was sent out, and I emailed a second transfer that they requested, we received the expenses on health insurance for retirees, which comes in through the retirement boards that we deal with, and that number was higher than the available budget in our health insurance account, so they requested that we do a fixed cost transfer as well from our unemployment, which had an available balance, into our employee health insurance account. So those were, we'll be asking for your approval to make those transfers with the town. As, again, I feel like it's more of a housekeeping matter than sort of an operational. We had some monies available in some of our salary accounts due to attrition. Some areas we weren't able to find qualified employees, and we had to use a contracted service to provide service to students. So the operating numbers increased while the salary numbers appeared to be underspent. So that's kind of where we're at with our end of year. And if you have any questions, be happy to try to answer
So
them.
any discussion, question?
Thank you.
So I have one of the budget transfer requests, that was the number 110 on 714. That was current balance of 148, 186.51. Is this the one that, so would this be the first one you want us to approve?
Yeah, either,
Okay.
however you want to do it, either way is fine.
All right, so it looks like you have, this is a request for a school fixed cost lateral transfer of $126,833.31. That's the first one. The
Correct.
second- And then the second one, I don't know that I have the total amount for that one.
It's $803,656.
Okay, so the first one would go from, well, it says account number, last digits are 5750 to 5711, from school unemployment to school group health.
Correct.
And then the second one, do you have the information for that one? To what they, so that we can, for housekeeping, make sure we're doing this right.
Would we just say as, there's a lot of
Yeah.
There's a lot of numbers.
Yeah, so it's not clear.
A lot of accounts.
I feel like, should we know the actual, so the 803, 85600, we're moving that from unemployment?
No, from the accounts shown above. So from the accounts on the left
Yep,
to the accounts on the right. So the accounts on the left are all the,
as clean cut as the first one, okay.
yeah,
Okay. So from salaries to operation.
from salaries to operating. And then within the salaries, these are sort of the sub-accounts that are on these 13 pages.
So we would first need a motion for the 126, 833.31 to move from unemployment to group health.
Correct.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Russo?
Second.
And a second by Mr. Parsons. All in favor, Mrs. Biagioni Smith?
Matter of interest, do we have to take a roll call because it's financial?
I'm asking you first, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
How do you
I'm just
vote? I'm
asking
sorry.
the question. I'm sorry, yes. Yes, aye.
And
Sorry.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
And Mr. Parsons?
Aye.
The chair votes aye as well. So that's the approval of 126, 833.31 from unemployment to group health. Okay, and the second would be for 803, 856 from salaries to operation.
Correct. Yeah, that should work.
Okay, is there a motion for that? Mrs. Anderson?
second it.
Second from Mr. Russo, to again move $803,000, $856 from our salaries budget to operating budget. Mrs. Biagioni Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
And Mr. Parsons?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well, so that's unanimous vote for both transfers. Thank you for all your work on this.
Okay.
Surprise.
I actually find it more interesting looking at the end-of-year budget, how it works out than it is to plan the following year's budget.
Me too.
Very satisfying. Okay. And from here, we go on to, we have our superintendent's evaluation. Sorry, lost track of where I was.
A lot of numbers in there.
Terrible bosses.
Okay. Bear with me, sorry about this. Okay, so just as an introduction, it is the responsibility of the school committee to review the superintendent and their practice annually. The role of the school committee is governance rather than management. The committee is, as evaluator, is composed of multiple individuals rather than a single evaluator, and the focus of the school committee is to focus on the outcome of a superintendent's work rather than the details of the implementation. The superintendent's evaluation is the only educator evaluation conducted in public, and that was just more kind of so people understand what we're doing here. The committee reviewed Superintendent Terry O'Regan's goals from August 2022 that were presented in open session and her year-end goal evidence. The Department of Education and Secondary Education's evaluation report for end-of-cycle summative evaluation report for superintendent and the indicator rubric for superintendent were both used by the 5 members of the committee to evaluate the superintendent's practice and progress. Brenda, in the areas of professional practice goal, student learning goal, and district improvement goals, the committee identified that you have made significant progress or that you have met these goals. In terms of the assessment of performance on 4 identified standards, instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture, the committee is in agreement that you are proficient. The committee also unanimously found your overall summative performance rating to be in the proficient range. In your role of superintendent, you have demonstrated proficient implementation of instructional leadership. By executing many significant initiatives this year, you have brought students, staff, and the community together with a shared focus on student achievement. You've delegated with oversight successful collaborative efforts to introduce new programming and included the school community in learning, understanding, and adopting of a shared vision. Your further efforts in 23-24 should ensure that students of all abilities are met with equal and fair opportunity for success through programming that best meets their needs with added feedback from student learners and families. You've developed, presented, and administered a well-written entry plan in your first year as superintendent. The documentation provided throughout your self-evaluation contains numerous indicators of evidence supporting your progress with regards to your strategic plan. You've also demonstrated high-level, effective strategic leadership for the Tewksbury Public School District. You've successfully completed year 1 of the NSIP and have stayed on course in your thoroughly defined entry plan and timeline. This has helped to establish a clear understanding for all stakeholders as to the educational direction of the district over the next 1 to 3 years. Your utilization of data, review of district documents, commitment to timelines, increased presence in the schools, and engagement with the district leadership team has helped to inform you of what is important to the Tewksbury Public School community. In your efforts to seek feedback and input from students, staff, families, and community stakeholders, it was appreciated by members that this data is used in your decision-making. Brenda, you have been regular in communication with the members of the school committee on matters of interest. You've been effective in managing the resolution of ongoing deliberation of such matters as needed. You have distributed timely communications to the school committee on matters of immediate interest, and you've developed best practice scenarios for transparency with regard to disseminating applicable information. You've worked effectively to restore, strengthen, and enhance the relationship of all stakeholders within the Tewksbury Public Schools and to ensure the best interest of the student population is at the center of all communications and/or decisions. The committee encourages you to continue your communication efforts to ensure it is received by all stakeholders, that it is clear and consistently dispersed throughout the district, and also to consider a more robust approach to public relations and enhanced real-time communication. In your oversight, you have demonstrated strength in your budgeting process to ensure that all budgets reflect the needs of the district. You've been fiscally responsible to meet the educational needs of all students. You've aggressively been seeking grant opportunities and welcome new opportunities for students, and your budget supports the district vision, mission, priorities, and goals. You communicate to the committee and the community how the budget is also applied. Brenda, you have demonstrated that you prioritize the hiring of high-quality staff and that you're committed to development and growth opportunities for all staff. The committee encourages you to maintain and increase efforts as needed to maintain proper staffing to meet the needs of all students throughout the schools. You're supportive of staff, often recognizing, honoring, and giving credit to district successes to the leadership and educators working with students. With the opening of the new Center Elementary School, grades 2 through 4, your leadership and collaborative efforts were wildly successful in anticipating building needs and closed this year within the planned budget. You led the move to the Center Elementary School with high efficiency. The building has come alive through the faculty and the students, and you continue to work closely with all stakeholders to assure the unexpected needs of staff and students are adequately addressed. With the evolving needs of staff and students, the committee supports further growth and a more robust and impactful approach to addressing and educating staff on mental health and the well-being of all district personnel and students. It has been a pleasure working with you in your first year as superintendent. Thank you for all that you're doing to move the district forward and for always putting the students first. We look forward to understanding the next phases and plans for the implementation of your district goals. So I will welcome you to have some words, and then the committee to also speak to you directly. Anything else you want to
It's
share?
unique to sit here and listen to all that, right? But this job is truly a labor of love, and it's because of this community. And honestly, I love my work, and I see it as never done. But I direct, right, the people. I'm going to do it again and really give credit where it's due. I get to sit in the seat of director or CEO or whatever title you want to use, superintendent of a school district, but it really is the hard work of our students and our staff and this administrative team and the support of this committee that makes every bit of progress we make happen, and it really does. So as much as I know this is your evaluation, and I apologize for all of the evidence and documents I shared with you, but you can see that this has been quite a year and quite a lot of work, and thankfully from our amazing team, because it's when we all work together in that direction that we're going to make this progress. So thank you for noticing, thank you for commenting on all the work we have achieved together, and I really thank you, the committee, for supporting the direction and improvements that we all seek for our students and families.
Great, thank you. Any comments from the committee? Mrs. Peter-Smith?
I would just like to say that I appreciate the format that you provide your evidence to us. It's very easy to read through, to align with the goals, with the indicators and whatnot throughout the entire process. It's an intense process that we all go through, I think, to do these and put that summative together that Ms. Garabedian read off to you. It's been a great first year, and I think that it's shown that we have, a good place that we're moving towards together. So I appreciate all that has been done. Thank you.
Mrs. Anderson?
Well, I came in probably 3/4 of the way through your first year, but I appreciate, especially with these policy meetings, I think that your education of the process and of the district really helps move along your vision and your goals. So I'm excited to see what you guys have next.
Thank you.
Mr. Russo?
Yeah, so kudos, seriously. I mean, it's been a fantastic year. I know it's been a lot of work. I know there's been a lot of late nights, a lot of, tears, laughter. I get it. I will say that the evaluation process, although I know it's a DESE thing, it is the most complicated performance evaluation I have ever done in my entire life, and I've done a lot of them. But it's education, so what's not to love about it, right? No, I think, Ms. Garabedian, you hit on all the things. I know that you kind of pulled a lot of the information together from our colleagues up here. I do think it's important. One of the things that I know Ms. Garabedian read off about from a PR perspective, I do think that that's important, and I sort of compare it to what I see sort of on the police department side, and I know Chief Columbus does a great job, I think, with getting information out there and sort of taking that PR approach. I do think that could help benefit us in a good manner. But I mean, if that was the one sort of knock, maybe everything else has just been superb. And I really appreciate the way you've been able to build bridges, especially where some of those things didn't necessarily exist before you stepped into this role. So kudos for that, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Parsons?
Yeah, I was a really big fan of how you compiled your evidence. I'm going to encourage you to continue that practice. I'm not going to lie, I think I spent too much time looking at that and less summarizing my thoughts on it. But I was very pleased to see the level of detail there. And again, this would be up for conversation with the committee, but personally, I think you're in the right to hone in your focus indicators. I did notice you selected all of them, which is admirable. I just want to point that out. That's going above and beyond and then some. And then I also just wanted to point out that, and this is just an excerpt from my own evaluation, said that Superintendent Regan is professional, kind, and attentive, even in difficult conversations and interactions with those who may not reciprocate the same qualities. And I just said that I'm grateful for your follow-through on matters of interest that I, my peers, or other stakeholders have brought to you. And above all else, and despite the complexity and demands of the superintendent job, Mrs. Regan always has students as the focal point in her decision-making. I don't know how you do your job. I wouldn't be able to be as calm, cool, collective as you are. You're truly a leader. You've demonstrated that this year, and just wanted to name it. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Nick.
And then my final thoughts, I agree with your sentiment. It's been quite a year. I think there's been a tremendous number of initiatives that you have supported or been spearheading, as the district has taken things on. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking some of the things that the committee has brought to you with a request, such as the safety audit. That was a big ask, and it was a really hard time, I think, for the district, and I'm starting to wonder if there's ever an easy time. So I do appreciate that. I appreciate that there have been several audits and other things like that the district has had to respond to, and you've led that pretty well. I think in times of adversity, there have been some challenges, but I appreciate how you've overcome some of those and how you've led your team through that. So thank you very much. And I really do look forward to, August and hearing to see where things are going to go forward.
Me too.
But, yeah. So thank you for your work this year. Okay. Next, we have our new business, school committee representative delegate to the MASC annual business meeting. This will require a vote. Right now, I think 4 of us have signed up for the MSC conference in November. There will need to be 1 member from the committee that represents us as a delegate at the annual business meeting. Katie, a little bit of backstory. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees will bring forward resolutions that have been brought to them from other school committees, and then those go to the larger business meeting where all of the districts that are present will vote on which legislative action they would like to see the MASC focus on to work on for the year. So it's interesting. I think it's, I did it one year. I found it interesting. Mr. Russo did it last year. So is there anybody who would like to just share their interest that they would like to do it this year?
I'd be okay with doing it again if the committee, unless somebody else would want to step up, I'd be more than happy to pass the torch as well, so it doesn't matter to me.
Madam Chair, can I confirm, it's Wednesday night, the delegate meeting?
I don't know where in the,
I think it's
Schedule.
usually the
The
first
first
night.
night.
Yeah, it's usually the first night.
the year I did it, we did it Saturday morning
At the end.
at the very end, but I think,
This is at the beginning, I think.
It is.
I think it made more sense that way, so I hope that it's this way. Yeah. Any interest from you, Mrs. Anderson?
I'd like to go to my first one
Okay.
first, and then maybe next year.
So, I mean, Mr. Russo, if you're interested, I'm happy to nominate you to be our delegate again this year.
I'm fine with that. I'll be okay with that.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor of having Mr. Russo represent the committee at the business meeting, please say aye.
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 Okay.
Oh, should I say aye as well?
Get that. Vote passed unanimously. Thank you for representing us.
No sweat.
All right. And then we have Mrs. Terry O'Regan, field trip.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm pleased to tell you that the annual Massachusetts Association of Student Councils Spring Conference is back on schedule. Tonight, I am seeking your consideration, this will require a vote, that our TMHS Student Council requests to attend the overnight annual conference in March. Ms. Deb Glass, the Student Council Advisor, has provided you with all the details necessary to consider this vote.
Any discussion? And I have none as well. I'm actually really excited to see them
Yeah.
just doing this. I think.
Good work.
I think
Good
the
networking.
district has a really strong student council community. So is there,
I'll make a motion to approve the overnight field trip request for the Student Council to attend March 6th through the 8th, 2024.
I'll second.
okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And with no opposed, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, and then carrying on, we have a non-union salaried personnel.
Yes, and Madam Chair, I'm going to turn this over to our business manager, Mr. David Libby.
Yeah, this is just a request for the committee, our non-union, non-contracted personnel. We really don't have an official vehicle by which to grant them a salary increase. So this is sort of how we've done this in years past with a school committee vote to get them generally the cost of living adjustment that's in line with the union collective bargaining agreements in a given year. So there are 34 folks involved here. So the 2.25 increase is a $38,628 increase for those 26 positions in our budget. There are 8 grant and revolving positions funded that represent another $6,927 increase for those employees.
Okay. Any discussion or,
I just had a question just to clarify.
yep,
LEA, what does that stand for?
Local educating agency or authority. I've seen it both ways.
Budget.
Okay.
It's us.
Okay.
It's our
Got it.
budget.
Okay. It's clear. No further questions, Madam Chair.
okay. And how does it please the board to move forward with this?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the non-union salary personnel increase for the fiscal 23-24.
I'll second.
Okay, so a motion by Mr. Russo, second by Mr. Parsons. How do you vote, Mrs. Smith?
Aye.
And Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Parsons, and I vote aye as well for a unanimous vote to increase by 2.25% these positions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and do we have matters of interest from anyone? Committee matters of interest?
Maybe just shout out a reminder about summer reading, because Ms. McDermott isn't here
Thank you.
tonight.
Sunshine for the brain.
She may be watching, I don't know. Yeah, that's all I had.
Good point, good call. I just wanted to recognize and appreciate the opportunity that Kayla and I both attended the MASC Summer Institute last weekend. It was a short, I think 2 hours on Friday night, and then went back on Saturday morning for 2 or 3 hours. And there were some really great presenters, one of which I went to was with the MIAA. And Mr. Parsons, I wanted to share with you that I did, speak with them about some of your concerns that you had in terms of coaching and equity and things like that. So they heard me, but, just wanted to let you know that I carried your concerns forward. And that's it for me for matters of interest. Anybody else? Okay. And future school committee dates, we have August 16th, 2023. It's the school committee admin workshop at 2 p.m. And then the regular meeting followed at 6. September 20th, 2023 is our September meeting. We have some subcommittee advisory committee dates. The elementary school building committee, as Mr. Russo said, was August 17th. The CPAC business meeting is, you said, September 22nd?
21st.
21st. The Wellness Advisory Committee is on September 6th, and Policy Subcommittee is still working out the next date. Future agenda items, does anybody have anything they'd like to bring forward for future? I have two. One, I would like to add to the August agenda a discussion and vote for us possibly to consider moving forward with the transfer of properties of the Trahan Elementary and North Street schools. So that's still kind of in discussion, but we may see that in August. And then also, I'd like to add to the August agenda the school committee roles and responsibilities that we just covered in the workshop prior to this, and whether that's in our consent agenda or on new business. But I'd like to bring that forward as well. That's all I can have for next one. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
And a second.
We have a motion to adjourn at 8:15. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that passes. Thank you.